There's plenty wrong with our culture, but I'm going to talk about prejudice and priorities. The priorities of prejudiced people. Speaking of two kinds of prejudices. One, the prejudice socialized into black people, even anti-black prejudice by black people. And two is the prejudice for police officers, in favor of police officers. There's a whole lot of stories that kind of weave together to talk about the prejudice of for police officers and against black people, even black prejudice against black people. One is Gary Patterson. He's from Westchester, New York, and police arrested him saying that he tried to get one of their guns, tried to pull it off out of the holster during an arrest the police were making. And then video shows that's not the case. But the problem is we have too many people that would believe the police right away. Why would the police lie about a young person doing that? A young black person doing that? Why would they lie about anyone doing that? Why would the police lie? Nevertheless, what do you know? The police lied. Why would the police do anything bad? Think back to Kelly Thomas, the homeless man that the police beat to death here in California. Why would the police do that? But it was caught. So the prejudice for police could not help that. Even though we have a lot of prejudice for police, it was evident by video. Your eyes won't lie to you. If you just watch this video of police being corrupt, it happens. But Gary Patterson barely, just luckily somebody was there filming. But imagine no one was there filming. Plenty of people would be prejudiced against him for being black and think, of course he grabbed the cop's gun. Why would the cop make something like that up? But it gets even worse than this. You find out that Gary Patterson, the reason that the whole incident happened is because he supposedly was getting in the way while they were arresting his friend. Why were they arresting his friend? She had an outstanding warrant. Why did they even approach them in the first place, the police? Why did the police even come up? The teens were said to be sitting in a car in a parking lot. Why were they approached at all? Well, somebody called, maybe, or maybe the police just came. Regardless, imagine this. Oh, the car smelled like marijuana, so probable cause. They didn't find any marijuana. The girl ends up having a warrant, so, ends justify the means. Nevertheless, do the ends of finding a girl with a warrant and then lying about Gary Patterson, does that justify the means of breaking down the rule of law, which is due process, and you can't just walk up to people and unreasonable search and seizure? Now, possibly the police did what police like to do, which is hustle and intimidate people into thinking that they are required to allow the police to search. Probably that happened because you sound like corrupt cops. Nevertheless, this Gary Patterson situation in Westchester, New York is just one thing going on very recently. Another thing happened in Dallas, Texas. This shows you the prejudice for police. Even though in Westchester we have these police unnecessarily bothering these teens, then lying about one, trying to ruin his life by lying about him grabbing the policeman's gun. Can you imagine what that would have done if nobody happened to catch it? And now the DA, as of now, is just talking about dropping the charges based on the video. What about charges against the police for defamation of character? Anything, whatever it would lead to. So while we have these corrupt cops here in New York, in Dallas, what's going on is Charles Alexander, the heroic homeless black guy who saved a cop from getting his ass beat by another homeless black guy named Samuel Dewey Jackson. Samuel was attacking this policeman, apparently, and Charles was the hero. And and defended the police officer. Apparently Jackson was attacking other people too, and maybe the police came. I mean, police do legitimate stuff, so it might have been all on the level, but imagine the instinct, even for a homeless black man in this culture, knowing how corrupt the system is, including the police, but right away jumping to the aid of a policeman getting attacked. Shouldn't happen like that. You should assume, well, this guy probably has a really good reason. He's a homeless black guy. But instead, we have Charles Hamilton. I kept thinking that was the name when I was reading the story. Charles Alexander, with a prejudice in favor of cops, wanting to help out this cop. And now people calling him a hero. I don't think it's heroic at all to help a person just because they're in a position of authority, certainly not in a corrupt culture. You know, this specific instance might have been warranted, but just to have that as your mindset, prejudice in favor of cops, bad idea. But imagine the culture that now talks about this guy as a hero, and talks about, he was a former gang member, Alexander was, Charles Alexander, and they talk about how unlikely it is that a gang member would help, as if people that join gangs really are the bad people that they're said to be, and that they're not just typically people trying to survive in a dangerous and corrupt culture. So wow, can you believe it? This guy actually had morals. Yeah, he probably had morals way back when he had to join a gang. He probably had morals when everyone gave up on him, he ended up homeless. But nevertheless, what's going to happen now? Now that he's heroic? Well, nothing. We're going to say, wow, that was nice of him, and he's going to still be homeless. And that shows you what our culture is. That those are the kinds of people you can find anywhere. People who've lost everything, and they're really decent people. See, a lot of popular culture aims at teaching you that the system works, and that if somebody is, for example, homeless, they're just a bad person, a drug addict, etc. And that you should just go along with good guy, bad guy stuff. All the good guys the cop, the bad guys the one the cop is going after. And it creates that prejudice. But of course in New York we see, hey, what if you jumped on this teen because the cop said he tried to grab my gun? And then what if nobody had filmed it and they ruined that guy's life? So we have Westchester, New York, crooked cops. Then we have Dallas, Texas, the heroic homeless guy who nobody will care about. Charles Alexander, nobody's going to go up and offer him a place to live because of this. If he was homeless, Lil Wayne people would. If he was homeless, you know, any famous person that matters, somebody's icon. Imagine some worthless musician, you know, Marilyn Manson or something. Imagine that person being homeless. Just for playing shit music, people would, nothing specific to against, I'm just throwing out popular culture references, people that are popular. But if Lil Wayne or Marilyn Manson, or if somebody like that was homeless, they'd have all kinds of people willing to just take them in. Well, of course, you're awesome. I'm going to take you in. Now, what about who wants to take in the heroic homeless guy? Well, no, it was just really cool. Now on to the next one. So the Charles Alexanders just show that this culture doesn't work, that good people do lose everything. Imagine Charles Alexander went to jail for 3 or 4 years for something that he did. When you hear about, oh, so-and-so did this and they got 3 years or 5 years or 6 years, what does that even mean? What does a certain amount of time do to help that person or rehabilitate them or help the system when it's arbitrary as hell? They don't have some program where it's, oh, if he's in there for 3 years, that's because he has to, you know, learn this or prove this. No, it's just arbitrary time, teaching people not to respect their time or not to respect the time of other people thrown away into jail. So what about the Charles Alexanders of the world who just after some period in jail, they come to understand, wow, you know, I gotta be different. Okay, I'm ready, I've been rehabilitated. No, you don't get rehabilitated until arbitrary time passes, and then you have to retroactively apologize and show that it's a mess. It is definitely a mess. The Charles Alexanders of the world, I wish they were less willing to be good people, but it's good for them. I mean, it's good for Charles Alexander to be the kind of person who would come to the aid of a person. It's just unfortunate he was coming to the aid of a police officer who could have easily just been doing something corrupt. Again, I'm talking about the instinct to be prejudiced, the socially engineered instinct to be prejudiced in favor of police. I'm not for that. And of course, if Charles Alexander was the one getting attacked and it was unnecessary, if it was unwarranted, if it was a cop lying on him like the cops in New York are lying on Gary Patterson, Charles Alexander's life would be ruined because people have a prejudice for police. People think that police don't do the kind of stuff that police often do. But imagine a well-meaning Charles Alexander attacking Kelly Thomas. Imagine Kelly Thomas, the homeless man that was killed. Imagine he got the upper hand on the police, and imagine a well-meaning Charles Alexander coming in helping the police. Or imagine, what was the other one? Rodney King, actually. Imagine if Rodney King had gotten the upper hand after getting beat like that by the cops, and somebody comes and subdues him, helping the police. Here's the point. We have a hell of a system when you can't be certain that the people to enforce the law are just, if they represent justice. And a reasonable person in our culture could completely doubt anytime they see a police officer engaging someone roughly, a reasonable person could doubt that that police officer is in the right. We see enough of that stuff going on. And imagine, again, I come from a time before the internet when you could see so many examples, and all those people who never got their videotape, there was never videotaped of the police lying about them or cheating them. That's the system we have now. Plenty rogue cops. And so that's the prejudice in favor of police. But we also have a prejudice. There's I think her name is Sharmika Moffett. Sharmika Moffett. She's in Louisiana. And she was, well, the story first goes, she was set on fire and by 3 men, and they wrote KKK and the N-word on her car. Then you come to find out, okay, 3 men was just kind of made up. She set herself on fire. Only her fingerprints were on the lighter fluid that was found just somewhere near the crime scene. And the toothpaste that was used to write the KKK and N-word had, so far they've narrowed it down to female DNA. But imagine, before DNA evidence linked her to the crime, and the fingerprints and everything, the prejudice was, well, this is a woman, so actually there's another prejudice I'm talking about, the prejudice of for police, for women, and against black people. So the idea is, it's crazy. A woman wouldn't do that. In fact, on World Star Hip Hop, where I saw the video, people were saying, before they were getting schooled to the fact that, no, you can look this up, the evidence is now showing the Moffat did it to herself. They're saying no one would do this to themselves, especially not a woman. Especially not a woman. And then she did. Now, is that woman worshiper, is that person prejudiced in favor of women? Are they going to change their mind and go, wow, I got to change my prejudice notion that women would never, and then they do. But we have a prejudice in favor of women. Now imagine random guys getting charged with that crime, and imagine for whatever reason that she was able to get them in enough trouble, and then it came to light. Would that make a difference to people? Like, wow, because plenty of people, actually specifically on World Star, plenty of people are saying like, wow, she was trying to create riot type situations, and it could have easily happened. But in accordance with prejudice for women, and even prejudice for black people by some people, there's an outpouring of support. Even the family, understandably, is saying, like, when they found out that she probably did it herself, they're like, this isn't the resolution we were hoping for, but nevertheless, this is the evidence. We thank the cops for helping. But there are people actually saying, oh, I hope that she gets the help she needs, and da-da-da. Really? The help that she needs, the physical and mental problems she must have, and da-da. So suddenly she's a victim. I mean, I agree, she's a victim of a system that would convince you to do something like that for whatever reason, to cause a race riot because she really wanted, she was hoping that it might become a race issue, and people would be galvanized to re-vote in Obama. Whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. The idea that people would wander in the direction of, we got to help this victim now. Like, what does it take to not be a victim as a woman in this culture? It's just crazy. So we got a mess of a culture. We have a whole lot of people ready to be prejudiced for the cops, which obviously is a bad idea. Look at the Gary Patterson, New York situation. We got people, that's people thinking like, well, yeah, I'll start like this. We got the prejudice for the cops in Dallas with the cop Charles Alexander prejudicially thinking that the cop is in the right. We got the prejudice against black people, which would be the Gary Patterson situation in New York, where plenty of people would say, well, they had him she had a warrant anyway, so it's okay to get all in their space, invade their space, not give them due process. They're up to no good anyways. Why were they engaged whatsoever? That wouldn't have happened to obedient, weak-minded white people. And then we have the prejudice for women, where a woman can set herself on fire and put some words on her car, and all of a sudden people are looking for someone else. Who else did it? I mean, it's a crazy situation, so you should first think wait a minute. But this one actually worked out pretty good, where they followed the evidence oh, she's bullshitting. But this one reminds me, last thing I'll say, this one reminds me of the Shaima Al-Awadi story, the lady who was killed here in El Cajon. I haven't followed back up on that in a while, but it's looking more and more like it was more likely an honor killing than the whole get out of our town, terrorist, hate crime, blame some white nationalist or something. But everyone jumped in the direction of, this is probably the most obvious thing, even though there was no evidence one way or the other. Fortunately, this Sharmika, the Moffat story, luckily they just went with the evidence right away and removed, I think they removed her claim as having been a victim. Instead it was self-infliction. But the system is still in place where people are going to see that, and they're not going to realize the underlying problem is this readiness to work based on prejudice. Well, of course, I mean, you have to trust the police. You have to necessarily think women are victims. You have to doubt black people. I mean, look at the percentage of black people and the percentage that are locked up, and that means they have a predilection towards crime. No, it couldn't possibly be. You think you found the one situation, the Gary Patterson in New York, that's the one situation where a cop lied on someone and tried to ruin their life? Or could it be that plenty of people will hate the system for the rest of their life because they are in based on things corrupt cops did? Maybe not all of them, probably not all of them, maybe not even a substantial amount, but enough to realize we have a lot of criminal police turning non-criminal people into criminals, trying to turn people like Gary Patterson into criminals. Almost worked for Gary Patterson. That is the breakdown of the rule of law. All that other stuff is just the breakdown of philosophy and reason, which, we have that in the culture. Most cultures have that to plenty extent. A breakdown of reason, okay, it's not reasonable to just always think women are victims, but, it works because then there's a lot to that. But the breakdown of philosophy is different than the breakdown of even just the rule of law. Police can't be corrupt, and if they are, they get hanged. How about that? That's really what it should be, because when you have the power to absolutely ruin someone's life with a lie, you do it so cavalier and so premeditated, because it takes premeditation to fill out all those forms and be like, yes, we are going to ruin this guy's life. For what? Doesn't matter for what. But when it shows to be false, cops should get hanged for that stuff. That is, when you have that kind of power, when there's such an imbalance of power and you misuse it that much, I think that is a socially unforgivable thing, to be a corrupt cop. Yeah. But even that aside, just look at the problem of our culture, which is prejudice in favor of police. We need to be prejudiced in favor of justice, and we need to weed out evil cops, and we need to keep our eyes on people who would try to ruin the lives of people like Gary Patterson. We need to be grateful to people like Charles Alexander for wanting to help somebody, but then do something for the Charles Alexanders of the world. Homeless men, homeless people, who have nothing but are clearly decent people. And we need not, of course, to scapegoat the Samuel Dewey Jacksons, the guy that attacked the cop. He was a kid at some point. We know the system fails people like him. So it's not so easy as this prejudice and the priorities that it brings. The prejudice of, well, okay, a woman, a cop, and a black guy, okay. Victim, justice person, and bad person. It's not that easy, but that's our system in the eyes of many people. And they're very foolish, and they're making everything worse for everyone. I'm not even going to go into explaining that, but seriously, that's the deal.